Everyone, how you guys doing? If this is your first time watching us, welcome. This is the Mon Mission podcast. My name is Joshua Montero, and my co-host is on the left. Couldn't get the words out of my mouth there, but that is Corstian Wilson, rocking that luscious dark green sweater over there. How you doing, my guy?
Uh, Doing pretty good. Uh, Obviously, not much NFL. Exciting news is there was like the first couple weeks of that free agency, but just hanging in there, trying to do my thing.
Yeah, we got a light episode today. Not much to discuss, but we are going to talk about Sneed. We're going to talk about a couple of rule changes. You've probably seen Twitter blow up. The Pat McAfee show talk about it. Like NFL owner meetings are still ongoing and whatnot. So a lot could change. But we're going to talk about two major rule changes and how it's going to impact the game. What are our thoughts on it? Because a lot of former players were against some of them. But yeah, a lot to look forward to. As far as like the future of the podcast, we are not going to be meeting next week, so we're not going to be uploading episodes next week. I'm going to be on a work travel trip, but 2 weeks from now, with the draft coming up next month, we are really excited to talk about players from the draft that we're excited about, and then potentially getting a mock draft out to you guys, just like we did in the last section, or maybe, well, maybe we might have a modified section of that and say like, oh, okay, here are guys that we expect to go in the first round or second round. We haven't really fleshed that out yet, but that's kind of where the podcast is headed. We really want to highlight some exciting players that I'm sure you want to keep tabs on for Dynasty Corsian. I'm always on the lookout for that. We got our drafts coming up for the rookies coming up there, and then you guys will probably want to know about the sleepers too. I got one I already am chopping at the bit to talk about. I'm not sure where he stands amongst like all the top of the running backs, but he's a under the radar prospect. I don't think anybody's talking about him right now. Maybe a couple, but a very good player. So I'm really excited to talk about more players like that coming up shortly. But for now, let's stick to what happened in the past week. Sneed, he is no longer a Kansas City Chief. They had franchise tagged him, but couldn't afford the price tag on him. They traded him to the Titans, and I believe the deal is 4 years, 76.4 million. I'm not sure what the guarantees are. Oh wait, okay. So NFL.com states he has 55 million in guaranteed money and a 20 million sign-us bonus. So
Hmm.
very nice deal for Legarius. What do you think of his new landing spot? What do you think this means for the Titans? What do you think this means for the Chiefs?
um, let's see. Well, I'm not necessarily super surprised that he was traded away from the Chiefs. I know when they first franchise tagged him, they told him that like he'd still be able to seek out opportunities for trade, and so I think both parties, at least from the between Sneed and the Chiefs, knew that there's probably going to be some type of parting in the near future. So I think the Chiefs aren't necessarily like. I mean, I guess they've game planned for this. And then um, obviously a great signing for the Titans right here. I think he's played great so far in his career. I hope that he can play through the scheme changes. I hope it isn't he's on a phenomenal Chiefs defense and he was just like perfect for that scheme, and then all of a sudden elsewhere he may not be as good. I hope that isn't the case for him because I mean he was, despite him being obviously on a rival team, he was still fun and an exciting type of player to watch. And so, like, potentially having him not play as good would be pretty unfortunate. I think this deal makes him like the fifth highest paid cornerback in the league right now. So that's pretty exciting. I don't know off the top of my head exactly like what the Titans sent over, but that's just kind of my first impressions of it all.
Yeah, the contract was 76.4 million, and then I think I mentioned the guarantees were 55 million. I
Mm-hmm.
think Jalen Johnson's deal was very close to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure where you ranks among that top five, but just looking at the depth chart real quick, they already got Chidobe Awuzie, which is a very nice corner from the Bengals. I think he had his rough patch of injuries in
Mm-hmm.
previous seasons, but that's a solid cornerback move if you look at it for a team that lost Kevin Byard in the middle of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and it really rounds up like what they have with Jeffrey Simmons and like Harold Landry, and then we loved Keandre Coburn coming out of the draft. So like it's solid defense right now. I think with the Titans, it it elevates their floor a little bit, but the AFC South is quickly becoming like one of the hardest divisions to play against, and I'm still not as high on them, like getting out of the basement of that division
Mm-hmm.
because I think everybody's forgetting about how good the Jaguars are. The Jaguars had a great free agency. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously everybody's knows is like, oh, Texans are got to be considered one of like the conference contenders already,
Mm-hmm.
just based on how CJ Stroud played, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
Had an amazing season, exceeded all expectations. And then you look at the Colts with Anthony Richardson, a guy who I'm really high on as a quarterback, who I think is going to have a high ceiling. And I think the Colts are in better shape than the Titans right now, um, just from like a top to bottom roster. If you look at their front seven, there's there's still like a mess to deal with. So it remains to be seen what happens during the draft, but I think it's going to come down to how much can Will Levis truly grow based on his college tape. I'm pessimistic on it, but he did have flashes towards the beginning of his starts. So you want to see, does he channel those and figure out and matures quickly enough within the second season where it's like, oh wait, the gap between the rest of the AFC South quarterbacks and Will Levis is not as steep as I perceive it to be,
Mm-hmm.
for instance. Um, but he's got a great surrounding cast around him with Calvin Ridley, who they just acquired, and DeAndre Hopkins as it is. Really high on Tajay Spears as a running back position. Then you add in Tony Pollard to that. They added another playmaker just now. So um, Titans are absolutely in it, but it's going to depend on the quarterback to me.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely made moves to like try to stay competitive within the division. And I laud them for that, you know. Because like I think looking at your division, it's pretty easy to like want to roll over and die just because it's a really high ceiling division right here that you got. But I think they at least attempted to make moves to in hopes that Will Levis can take that next step for them. And so I think it's still really hard for them to get even first or like definitely first or second in that division. But I think they could potentially be kind of like a strong third place. That's like maybe trying to sneak into the wild card if with a big if that Will Levis is able to take that next step and at least be kind of like a middle of the pack quarterback for him. I don't think he make there's a chance, but I don't think he makes the jump of being from what he was last season to a superstar quarterback. But if he's again even like ranked 20th in the league in terms of like quarterback rankings, I think that's like can get them to a comfortable 500-ish record that has the Titans hopeful for their future. But
Yeah. I don't think like this is like a next season expect the Titans
mm-hmm.
in the playoffs. Like I think we need to temper expectations a little bit, especially with a new coaching staff. Like Brian Callahan did a lot of great things with the Bengals, and it seems like he's trying to go with a three wide receiver set by getting through Calvin Ridley. People forget about Traylon Burks already. Like he's their
Mm-hmm.
slot receiver right now. He still has a lot of untapped potential, and this allows him to be in kind of like the Debo Samuel role.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people compared him to that, and it like with Hopkins and Ridley, it allows like Burks to be himself. It allows Ridley to be dominant as a two. Like so, like on the offensive side, like that's great. But are they going to be used that way? Like I don't know too much about their offensive coordinator, Nick Coles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know too much about Denard Wilson as a defensive coordinator. So I have a lot of questions on how the coaching staff's going to use these guys. Because it's great to assemble all this talent for sure, and the players make up a majority of your performance. But like coaching can win and lose you games at moments. Mostly lose on that side of things. But um, yeah, just a lot of questions they have to answer. They have to prove themselves for sure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
going for the Chiefs side, I definitely think they're trying to target somebody from the draft, um, even though like they have their overall secondary is like really strong. Um, do you think they're going to target one in the first round? Maybe a guy like Cooper DeJean or like Kenyon Mitchell or Nate Wiggins.
uh I could envision it. I mean they're in a really nice like the Chiefs are in a nice spot to you know pick who they want. Um which is pretty nice. Because I think on the Chiefs side, even if they don't get a cornerback, like whoever they draft will be like a key add that they think is like the best guy to get them moving forward. Uh, and so I wouldn't be like I think their top priority should be corner, but um, again with knowing the Chiefs, like they could literally pick anybody, and it would just make them that more of a threat.
Yeah, I mean, the only other position I would think of is wide receiver at this point, or like replenishing their offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because right now their left tackle is Wanya Morris.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea who he is, so I'm gonna assume he has to prove himself to be like a tackle. So I would think they go tackle as well. But like, yeah, the rest of their defense is like they started in the Super Bowl. Like, what a
Mm-hmm.
mess with that. And their starting cornerbacks are Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson, both young players who've shined in their roles. And then I think they still have Trent McDuffie as their slot cornerback. So they really want to prioritize keeping him,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then trying to manage the situation there. So I could see them pick a corner in the draft, but with you, like you said, they're pretty much in the position where they can pick whoever they want. I think the only caveats is like I would prioritize wide receiving and like left tackle talent there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe left tackle might be more important to them as opposed to other positions.
Yeah, and then from like reports I heard about the draft, I know the offensive line class. I mean, like at least the tackles in this class are supposed to be pretty good, and so I think it's another case of the quarterbacks and the receivers of how far do you let guys, or how far do you like hold off on drafting a position just because there is pretty decent depth down the board. And I think Chiefs could be one of those teams that see the potential of getting a best player available type position at their in the beginning, and then potentially landing one of those superstar tackles or receivers in that second or third round if certain guys on their board continue to fall.
Yeah, I mean, the guys that I think would make sense on the tackle spot are like probably Fuaga and Futanu. They're like right under like Joe Alt, but they're like projected to be picked in like the middle of the first round. So like I don't know if the Chiefs can get a guy like that right now, or they could just re-sign Donovan Smith. I don't know if he signed anywhere. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he's still on the market.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very they're in a very interesting spot where they have very few holes, so they don't have to worry about like obviously they have to figure out guys to narrow down the depth chart, but they're not in a position where like, oh, we have a massive need in the linebacking spot.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna be gashed with play action like all game long. That's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
Without your like left tackle, but like most of your offensive line set, it's a problem. But like you can figure out ways to scheme out of that, especially with Patrick Mahomes and like Andy Reid. Um, I'm not saying I'm not pretending like I don't understand what happened in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. I really don't. But like I think the Chiefs will adjust. It's just a matter of like how are they going to address wide receiver, left tackle,
Mm-hmm.
cornerback. Because obviously the Jerry Sneed, like, don't want to take anything away from him. All world talent.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, top 5 cornerback that got paid like that. Um, how are you gonna replace that talent? It's
Mm-hmm.
gonna be like within you can, but like you're gonna be low on the depth side of it, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't approximate what Sneed did like 100%. It's probably maybe 70 or 80. Um, so like, can you find a guy like that? And if so, like, should you find one in the 4th or 5th round? If not, I would take one of those top 3 options, meaning like DeJohn, Nate Wiggins, or like forget the other guy I mentioned, but like one of those guys that you're like, okay, high talent, we can work with this.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sweet. Let's talk about some tackling issues. I don't think players can tackle anymore, basically, after looking at this ban. So basically, if you saw the hit on Mark Andrews, I think a Bengals player had hit him,
Yeah,
where
Logan
like
Wilson.
Logan Wilson, not a dirty play by any means, great linebacker, love watching him
Mm-hmm.
play, but the technique he used was like called the drop tackle. It's not something actually labeled that way in the NFL. It's just something that took a life of its own. Like it's actually, I think it originated in rugby.
Mm.
um, and like players just started practicing that way. But not many coaches teach it that way. Um, but the NFL looked at this and saw, okay, there was a high increase in statistics on this, like leading to injuries. Um, like when you look at it, it's brutal. It's brutal when you see like a guy like put his weight on like the tight end or
Hmm.
like any other players to, in fact, like to make the tackle itself. And a lot of former players were against it. Pat McAfee was, AJ Hawk was, Richard Sherman was, like you name it. Like
Hmm.
you're like, okay, so this is gonna. And JJ Watt, I think, put it out like, oh, might as well convert it to like flag football, add the flags
Hmm.
in there and whatnot. So, um, what did you think of this ban?
Um, so I was kind of like doing some digging. I don't know if I like understood 100% right, but apparently that tackle will still be legal in the NFL. It just so what I think is supposed to be penalized is if the player lands on the legs of the player he's tackling. And so like in that instance of that clip, that's not supposed to get called as a flag. It just that's like an example of like what a hip drop is. But then it's like if he had landed on Mark Andrews' legs, that would have been a result in like the flag being thrown on that. And so like I mean I guess for that extent it makes sense, I guess, for the sake of protection. That always does look like a dangerous end result, but I feel like it's hard for like if a player's going in for that play and like I don't feel like they have much control over how it ends up landing at the end of the day. But
Yeah, yeah, that's and this is why we need refs to study this up and like work full time on this, so then they can enforce this correctly. Um, I think the major issue is like how you're gonna enforce a technique like this in the season, and like the preseason is gonna be the only barometer because you're not gonna see like people on their own teams like tackling like that in practice. Like when you're in like training camps and like onboarding basically for the season, like
mm-hmm,
nobody's gonna tackle like they want everybody on their team to be healthy. So like
mm-hmm,
you're not gonna see this until like preseason or maybe like the first couple games of the season. And that will give you kind of like a pre-test on like, oh, how are these rules being implemented? But to take a couple steps back, I'm going to read out the rule real quick. So just so we're on the same page. So according to NFL, the hip drop tackle in question involves a swivel technique in which a player grabs the runner with both hands and wraps the runner with both arms and unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing on and trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee. So I think the key word here is like how they're unweighting themselves,
mm-hmm,
which I think that's just code for like if they just like charge in head first, like with their feet off the ground, like basically diving to make the tackle. So like your full
mm-hmm,
weight is on the player. And then the location, like you mentioned, um, lower body injuries. They're really trying to target that. So you don't break your fibula, you don't tear your ACL, you don't break your kneecap, like break your ankle and whatnot.
mm-hmm.
From this technique. So that's kind of the idea there.
Yeah, and yeah, and like I found like some stats somewhere had like or like maybe the NFL reported it, but like they'd only like accounted for 100 tackles in the last 2 years, those hip drops, which apparently is roughly 0.15% of tackles over the last 2 seasons. So I think overall this really isn't that great of an issue. But I do think where it'll happen is like you said with the referees, like not fully understanding how to call this penalty. And so then you'll have, I think, game instances where someone in a different type of tackle just happens to land on legs, and just because like the player may have spun as he was falling, they'll call a flag and say, "Oh, that was the hip drop tackle rule," and then I think that's where all the issues will start to happen more so
And like
than.
offensive guys will probably find a way to like use it to their advantage too. Not saying they're probably gonna break their leg in order to get the penalty. That's a
Mhm,
dumb. But like there there are probably like techniques that are gonna be taught that's like not necessarily like the right technique. It shouldn't be taught where like they're like trying to force the refs to throw a
mhm,
flag on it.
yeah.
Like and the whole reason why it's a big deal is we haven't even gotten to the penalty situation on it. The tackle will result in a 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down. So it's basically a pass interference equivalent penalty
Hmm.
just based on tackle technique. So I think it's the first time like the league is like implementing something like this. And I'll be I think the one thing I'm curious to see is how this will affect like the roughing the passer penalties.
Hmm.
Because if they do a good job of enforcing this technique, the hip drop tackle and like enforcing right tackling techniques, could you enforce the right like roughing the passer techniques or like the calls that they make there? Because right now, roughing the passer, like that's the one thing that should be looked at because it's stupid. Like some like defensive tackles or defensive ends can't control themselves on the way they take down the quarterback because they're
Hmm.
either pushed into him or like they can't stop their momentum in time where the quarterback lets the ball go at the last minute and it's still called like roughing the pass because of the way it looks and the way quarterbacks try to roll off or like make it look worse than it is.
Hmm.
Um, so what I'm trying to say is the way these tackles are going to be enforcing the techniques that defensive players like come up with to tackle now,
Hmm.
like how will this apply like when you sack the quarterback versus like a rough in the passer? Where is that line? And I hope like this is like a much safer way so you see like less skill positioning players get hurt. Because while there were less injuries with like the guarding caps and concussions, like we had like a third of the league lose their starting quarterback for like part of the time for a full season. So like even with all the rough in the passer penalties, it still didn't make a magnificent difference on like quarterbacks staying healthy. So you can't tell me you're trying to protect the quarterback entirely when like half like a third of the league is getting hurt on like situations and plays.
Hmm.
So like I you probably don't want to see this. I don't want to see I don't want it to be like flag football or two-hand touch. So like the NFL's got to figure out a way to like draw the line between violence and like right technique and also like extreme like over the top. This is well beyond like being a violent football player.
Hmm.
This seems like targeted like it's um basically what the Saints did um in that like scandal in
Hmm.
2008 2009 or I don't remember the year, but basically like the way they're going to enforce this in the season is going to matter because games could be won or lost with this. But more importantly, roughing the passer, which is still haven't been addressed in these owner meetings, could possibly be modified for the better. So I'm trying to maintain cautious optimism here.
Hmm.
Alrighty, so that was one rule. We both don't think it's as bad as like the mainstream media is making it out to be.
Hmm.
A lot of foreign players are getting mad by it, but like I mean, I think Matt Eberflus said on like one of his press conferences that he doesn't even teach the hip drop technique. He teaches like the hamstring tackle, like you tackle player by the hamstrings,
Hmm.
which seems like it's a much safer technique because he's been teaching it for I want to say almost 30 years now, which is wild. But yeah, we hope this skill position players and any players like running with the ball like maintain safety. Another rule designed to address that is the new kickoff rules. Um, Basically, the NFL is going to adopt this in the procedures that can rule it out. Sorry, I'm gonna list out the rules here. So, the kicking team will kick off from its own 35-yard line. I think that stayed the same. The 10 members of the kicking team will line up on the receiving team's 40-yard line. So not on the same like line that the ball is on from where the kicking team
Hmm.
is. They're gonna be like basically 25 yards away from where the kicker is, and a lot closer to the receiving team. A minimum of 9 members of the receiving team will line up between their own 30 and 35-yard lines. Um, so, like the receiving team can choose like how they want to line up their guys like in between those yard lines, and they're going to be like 5 to 10 yards away from the kickoff team, like except the kicker. Um, Receiving team can have zero, one, or two players inside their own 30-yard line to receive the kickoff. The play begins when the ball is either caught, hits the ground in the landing zone. The landing zone is anywhere inside the receiving team's own 20-yard line. before the goal line, or if the play begins also if it's returned from the end zone. So that's when all players can move.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the kickoff team, except for the kicker, can move once the ball is either caught, lands inside the 20, or like it's returned from the end zone. Um, any kick that hits the landing zone must be returned. Um, so you can't just let it go and hope it's a touchback. You have to return it. Any kick that bounces any kick that bounces from the landing zone into the end zone must be returned or kneeled for a touchback. If a kick doesn't reach the landing zone, the receiving team gets possession of its own 40-yard line. Um, if the ball enters the end zone in the air, the receiving team can return it or kneel it for its possession at its own 30-yard line. If the ball is kicked out of bounds, the receiving team gets possession of its 40-yard line. There are no fair catches. Onside kicks are only permitted in the fourth quarter and must be declared to officials. So I think the onside kick rule is going to remain the same here. But for the most part, basically, it's the implementation of the landing zone and where the players start. That's like a major change here. And if it like hits in the landing zone, it has to be returned. You can't just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it ends up in the end zone where it's like bouncing in the landing zone, you have to return it or kneel it. You have to
Mm-hmm.
kneel. You can't just let it go and like hope the ball bounces out of bounds or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Or it's gonna bounce out of bounds. So um, that's a lot of rules. What did you take away
Yeah.
from there?
Um. Yeah. I mean, we can't really knock it until we really see it, at least in NFL action. I think this season, or whenever it's implemented, it'll be kind of like a weird-ish special teams kind of look, just because all these like NFL special teams coordinators are gonna have to strategize, figure out like the best way to have their teams uh, be successful in this new kickoff format. And then I do think it's kind of a bummer though that we're gonna lose some of the surprise onside kicks that we see throughout the season. Obviously,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to the point that I think too many teams will be like too bummed about it. But it's kind of fun when you see a team like they open up the half and kick an onside kick just to like try to get the ball, at ball at the start of the half or something. But it seems like that's all going away. And then I think another thing with this is we'll probably see a lot more running backs starting to be, the return specialist in the NFL, just because a
Hmm.
lot more close quarter kind of like playing that'll be taking place. And so you want a guy who's a bit more sturdy in terms of, quickly engaging in contact versus uh, what, the current way of doing kickoffs is right now.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I like that point about the running backs. Just to quickly address that, like I could see like a guy like you want like a Debo Samuel type player also in that, like just in case like
Mm-hmm.
if CB team can't block a guy, like that you can break tackles, like that would kind of be like the kind of guy I would
Mm-hmm.
put in that situation. I really like it for both special team units actually, because
Mm-hmm.
one, it eliminates injuries like on both fronts because like you don't have one team getting a running start and then like trying to like keep up with them and then like high speed equals high force, right? So you're trying to eliminate the amount of injuries that occur. Um, but at the same time, you still keep the strategic aspect of the game and improve on it. So like for special teams coordinators, like good ones are going to be highly sought out because of how they quickly adapt to these new rules and how they design it. Like one of my favorite returns, and this is coming from a Devin Hester fan, um,
Mm-hmm.
was when the Rams like played the Seahawks one year when the Seahawks were like Legion of Boom status. Like I don't know if it was the year they won the Super Bowl or not, but the Rams beat them one time, like with this unique like punt return where a guy like didn't wave fair catch, but he looked like he was about to, and then like the ball was caught on the opposite end of the field. Like if you're looking at it like horizontally, so he was on the guy who fake fair caught it was on the right side of the field. The other guy who
Mm-hmm.
actually returned it was on the left side of the field. And by the time like the ball hit that guy and he started running, um, the punt kickoff team like was in all shambles because they went after the first guy. So the Rams got a wide open punt return touchdown. And I thought that was really cool because I'm like, like who calls that? Who calls that from a punt return team? You never see that called. So that was just like ingenious moment. So I can only imagine what it's like if you're allowed to have two returners back there, like
Mhm.
what kind of scheme you have set up. And like you could do like end around stuff with like guys from the 30-yard line if the receiving team like catches it in the landing zone, and then like you could do all sorts of fun stuff. So I'm curious to see how teams like figure out how to return it. And I think what makes it more impressive is like it shows how impressive it was that Cordell Patterson and Devin Hester were like the kick returners that they are because they were able to get kick returns in like the traditional format. I feel like the kickoff like prior to the change was very like it felt very ceremonious. Like at the start like of every field. Oh, we're just like kicking it. And like 80% of the time it like lands at the 20-yard line or like player runs up to the 25-yard line. Like every once in a while, you see a guy like return to the 40-yard line, but it's rare to see a guy returning for a touchdown. And I
Mhm.
feel like with this move, it's going to make special teams a lot more of a larger factor. It's gonna place an emphasis on like special return abilities. Like if you have that, that's going to be a major asset to your game. And it's
Mhm.
going to lead to more excitement. So I like the rule
Mhm.
change.
Yeah.
I mean, I I do think it's kind of weird that like the kickoff team starting at the 40-yard line though. I was like,
Yeah.
is
I
that
feel
really
like.
gonna that gives you like 5 yards to like engage the team that's about to like
Uh
tackle your
huh.
returner. So it's kind of like I would have given them a little bit more space.
Yeah. 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 It'll be again. I think an interesting adjustment for both fans and like players, just because like us watching it's gonna feel obviously not like what we've grown up basically watching our entire lives, but then the players obviously have to just adjust to this new strategy and like it'll be interesting to see how teams prep over the course of the off season for this type of strategy. Just because like once you're in an NFL like an actual game doing this type of kickoff, I feel like we'll see a number of players slip through the cracks, and we'll see teams that start off on like the 2 yard line. Like they'll get like
Yeah.
it'll get blown up really quick, and then on the other side we'll also probably see the returners a lot more slip through the crack and like just break one out for like a huge kick return. Like so, I think we'll see a bit of both. At
It's
least
gonna
for the
make returners and kickers a lot more important. A lot more important, which I like.
yeah. And so that first season, it'll definitely be quite an interesting thing for at least the coaches to try to figure out in game and figure out how the best way to set up things are.
Yeah, and imagine what if you see more onside kicks as a result of that? Like because like
Mm-hmm.
teams are like, oh, I don't want to kick it to this guy. I'd rather just like kick an onside kick and then have the team start at like our own 40 or 50, then have a guy return it all the way to the 20 or 30-yard line. If like statistics are pointing out that like his average kick return like average is like 60 yards, so he's gonna be there anyway. Why risk a return touchdown like in a one possession game and whatnot? That's gonna be really interesting to see. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cause imagine this: like you just scored a touchdown with like 30 seconds remaining, and you're up by like four, for instance, like 21-17. And then you kick off with these new kickoff rules and you lose because the guy returns it for a touchdown. Versus like
Mm-hmm.
in the old format, it's probably going to go to the 25 or 30-yard line because it's
Mm-hmm.
again very difficult to return it like that. And like I could see a couple games go that way when it's like, oh, they had it, but did they really? And it's like even if like the returner gets it to the 40-yard line, the team has a chance to win. And I like what you mentioned about the running backs because like guys' abilities to navigate like tight creases and like read leverage, like a defender's like just because you see open grass, don't run to it. Run away from the leverage that the defensive player has on the tackle. So if they're lined up on the right side of the tackle, that means if you run to the right, you're probably going to get tackled.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you force right for a second, then go left, then the defensive guy doesn't have enough time to move over to the left side of the tackle and pursue you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's like little things like that. The nuances of the game is going to be important for sure. But um, I'm all aboard for more excitement in the league. I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Did you have anything to add on here? Or you want good to call it a day?
I think that's good for today. It's fun kind of seeing the seasonal rules, I guess, the voting that happens. This is always kind of like scary to see just new rules implemented because you don't want it to like ruin the game. But I feel like, we've had a bunch of rules go through and I still enjoy watching it. So I guess it hasn't broken the game quite yet.
Yeah.
But
One good one we didn't even talk about was the new challenge rule that got
oh
like
yeah.
adjusted. Yeah. So basically, for all our viewers out there, it used to be that you have to hit on both of your challenges to get a third challenge. But now, like, if you win just one of the two, you get a third challenge, which I really like because you're gonna have questionable calls at the end of games and like high leverage moments in the fourth quarter. So you wanna hit on your challenges to like again make smart decisions. And if you're a great coach, you want that opportunity to continue like looking like a great coach and like helping your team out. So I like it. I like the move in short. But what did you think of the move?
Yeah, I think it's a good move. I think, it encourages more challenges to take place. And obviously, that makes it for a more accurate game technically, which is good.
Yep. It remains to be seen how they're going to handle the last 2 minutes and like BS calls that come in the middle of that. But for now, we'll keep it on a positive note. I'm excited about these changes and excited about the draft. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you can follow us on our Instagram if you haven't already. Follow where Corstian's finger is pointing. I'm on .a.mission. That's a tagline on Instagram. If you want to subscribe to us on YouTube, give a like and comment. That'd be greatly appreciated. It's Amon space A space mission. So 3 words there. Don't know why I had to enunciate it like that, but I'm weird. So with that, take it easy, guys. We'll see you in a bit.
Peace out.